Maxime Bernier yesterday had himself a little meltdown on Twitter. He's furious. Furious that Canadians didn't reward his principled, populist, small government manifesto by handing him, well, anything. Not a seat, not a breakthrough, not even relevance. According to Max, his party didn't collapse, it was betrayed. Hijacked by hysteria. Tricked by strategic voters and drowned out by CPC influencers and trolls. Everyone's to blame but the guy who led his party in one of the biggest nosedives in Canadian political history. Let's look at what actually happened. In 2021, the PPC pulled in about 840,000 votes. Just under 1 million people. This election, roughly 140,000. That's an 83% drop. You don't need a political science degree to know what that means. The People's Party of Canada didn't just lose ground, it fell off the map. The PPC pulled in 0.7 of the national vote. That's right, 0.7%. That's not a base. That's a rounding error away from political extinction. To put that in perspective, they finished with about the same vote count as the Green Party. And yes, Elizabeth May, who's been clinging on to relevance since the Harper years, now holds more weight in Parliament than Maxime Bernier. You can call this a setback if you want, but for the rest of the country, it's a verdict. Maxime Bernier isn't building a movement. He's managing a decline. And based on his latest meltdown, he's blaming everyone but himself. 83% of his supporters walked away, and instead of asking why, he's scolding them for not staying loyal to his brand. And this is supposed to be leadership? Let's get serious. This is coming from a man who spent 4 years cosplaying as the last real conservative, while doing absolutely nothing to challenge the actual liberal regime destroying this country. When was the last time Maxime Bernier ran a serious liberal riding? When did he last challenge Justin Trudeau? When did he ever step into a real fight? He doesn't. He runs where it's safe to lose because winning means taking responsibility and losing keeps the grift alive. And now that he's been humiliated again, he wants to blame hysteria. He says people were tricked into voting conservative because they wanted to beat the Liberals. Yeah, Max, because they actually wanted to beat the Liberals. That's not hysteria. That's survival. That's a reality for a generation who can't afford homes, can't start families, and is being bled to dry by an elitist class you never once managed to confront in any meaningful way. You didn't split the vote, Max. You split the movement. And you made yourself the story. You turned yourself into the party, into a brand, a platform for hot takes, and a microphone for personal grievances. And then when Canadians desperately rallied around the only viable option to replace the swamp, you lashed out, not at the establishment, at the people who rejected you. Here's the truth. If your ideas were resonating, you'd still have voters. If your leadership mattered, you'd have a seat, but you don't. And your tantrum tells us everything we need to know and exactly why it's happening. This isn't about principle. It's about control, and Maxime Bernier can't stand the fact that Canadians moved on without him. So he's doing what every political grifter does when the money runs dry. He's blaming the audience. But make no mistake, this isn't how we win back our country. We're not going to claw back from the swamp with slogans and nostalgia for 2021. It's going to take real work, real candidates, and a unified movement that knows who the real enemy is. And it's not Pierre Poilievre. Now look, I don't usually take pot shots at Maxime Bernier. I know many of you following this are proud, diehard PPC supporters. You care about freedom, sovereignty, and conservative values, and I respect that. I do. A lot of you supported the PPC when no one else was talking about vaccine mandates, globalism, or the utter collapse of this country's political class. But let's be honest, Maxime Bernier is not your messiah. He's a politician. One who built a brand around telling the truth until the truth wasn't convenient for him anymore. How do I know? Because he blocked me on Twitter. That's right, the man who built a career about saying he's the only real defender of free speech, the guy who claims to be unbought, uncensored, and based, blocked me for criticizing him. So let's be clear. If you can't handle being called out on X, you're not ready to take on Ottawa. The defender of values, the savior of conservatism, can't even stomach the criticisms of a former MMA writer? Come on. He didn't even debate it. He didn't refute it. He just hit the block button and ran. And that tells you everything. Bernier doesn't want accountability. He wants applause. He wants to be cheered and not challenged. But this isn't a personality cult. It's a political movement, or at least it should be. And if the guy in the front can't take criticism, maybe it's time to ask if he's still leading or just standing in the way. And here's the part that nobody wants to say out loud. Maxime Bernier didn't emerge from outside the political machine. He is the machine. The man spent decades as a political cabinet minister in the Harper government. He walked the halls of power. He cut his teeth in the same party he now calls fake. He wasn't some outsider storming the gates. He helped build the gates. The same bureaucracy, the same political culture, the same Ottawa gamesmanship. And now he wants you to believe he's an outsider and a revolutionary, a lone voice in the wilderness. Give me a fucking break. He's not some principled renegade. He's cosplaying as a conservative. Maxime Bernier is doing his best impression on Ron Paul, but without the consistency, without the humility, and without a shred of actual momentum. But let's call it what it is. It's the biggest grift in Canadian politics. Why? Because he knows the people he speaks to are fed up, disillusioned, and desperate for someone to tell the truth. And instead of building something real, he's built a brand. He's monetized dissent. He's turned frustration into merch. He feeds you a line, but when push comes to shove, he folds like every other politician he claims to oppose. Don't forget, this is the same guy who lost his own seat, then spent 3 years blaming everyone else for it. And now, after losing 83% of the vote, he's still out there talking about his ideas moving the Overton window. So let's just say it plainly. Maxime Bernier was relevant in 2021. He tapped into something real. Frustration, anger, a hunger for accountability. And for a brief moment, he had the country's attention. But that moment is over. Now he's selling a grift. The movement that once claimed to fight the establishment is now a storefront for podcast, a donation link, and PPC branded merch. That's not a revolution. That's a Shopify store. And sorry, but I'm not looking for a salesman. I want someone who can take on Mark Carnier and win. Not someone who wags his finger at the one party with a spine and the structure to do it. Max can keep blaming voters. He can keep blocking critics. And he can keep selling his brand. But the rest of us, we're moving on.